Okay, hi guys. Let's go over your essay prep really quick just to make sure that everyone has a hang of this. Step one is to understand the prompt. Our prompt says, in the period 600 CE to 1450 CE, advanced civilizations developed throughout the Americas. Develop an argument that compares two important empires of the Americas during this time. So, obviously, we've done this a couple times already. You need to circle the words that indicate the targeted reasoning skill. That should have been pretty obvious in this example. Comparison is a little bit easier because it's kind of hard for them to ask you to do this without either saying compare or contrast or even asking for similarities or differences. So compares is the word that you're going to want to circle. And underline the words that indicate the topic. The topic is two important empires of the Americas, or a comparison of two important empires of the Americas. And then you want to place a box around the time period, which is 600 CE to 1450 CE, or simply period 3 that we've been studying. Okay, hopefully everyone was able to do that on their own. If not, do it now. Step 2 is to brainstorm. First, we have to brainstorm contextualization or context. My idea for this essay prep would be to discuss earlier civilizations of the Americas, such as the Olmec, Maya, Chavin, or Carol. It's not the only correct answer. If you brainstorm something different, that's fine. Now let's look at our actual comparison. Hopefully everyone drew a Venn diagram for this, because if you looked at the posters on our wall, that's the graphic organizer we want to use when we are comparing. Let's pause for a minute so that you can write some of this information down, just in case you didn't have as much information in your Venn diagram as I have in mine. Okay, so obviously on the left here, we have information about the Aztec, and on the right, we have information about the Inca, and of course in the center are the things that they have in common. So mostly what I've written down here, these are different things that we read about in reading 3.5, and what you're going to want to do after you've brainstormed and you have all this information, you have to decide what are your 3 to 4 most compelling similarities or differences. Okay, so even though they do have a lot of differences, I'm going to look at my similarities first. What do they have in common? They're both polytheistic. Change colors there. They're both polytheistic, and they both hold the sun god as the most important god. So I think that's a pretty important similarity. They also both have extremely impressive infrastructure. If you don't know what infrastructure is, that's a word you need to add to your personal dictionary. On the other hand, an important difference is how they ran the empires, like the way that they administered the empires. On the one hand, the Aztec were very war-focused and aggressive because they needed more people to sacrifice. That's one reason they waged war. Whereas in the Inca Empire, they were really motivated by something called split inheritance. Okay, and while the Aztec was really a fear-based empire, the Inca, they actually tried to incorporate conquered people. They tried to include the people that they conquered. They tried to create loyalty. And so that's a pretty big difference. You could have chosen any number of similarities and differences for this prompt. You do typically with comparison, if it asks you to compare, that's implying that it wants both similarities and differences. Okay, both similarities and differences. And there's obviously other things that I could have chosen, but these are the ones I'm going to go with. Okay, up first, we have contextualization. I decided to type it up this time instead of taking a picture of the handwritten version because I know it was hard for some of you to see last time. So let's read this together and then you'll have a chance to write it down. The first civilization in pre-classical Mesoamerica were the Olmec. While historians do not have a deep understanding of this group, they left behind fascinating artwork, such as the famous colossal heads found around San Lorenzo. Sorry, just noticing that typo. You don't need the word at. Okay. Olmec influence can be traced to the classical Maya at Teotihuacan, as well as the post-classical Aztec. Similarly, in South America, the Corral and Chavin civilizations influenced the later Inca Empire. During the 14th and 15th centuries, both the Aztec and the Inca grew into powerful empires. So I'm going to pause, give you some time to write that down. Okay, so now we're going to be ready for our thesis statement. Notice that I started out pretty broad. I'm talking about the Olmec, which is way before the time period of the Aztec and the Inca, but I'm zooming in throughout the contextualization until I finally get to this last sentence where I'm basically leading into the answer to my question, or to the question. All right, here is our thesis statement. There were many similarities between the Aztec and Inca, such as their religious practices and impressive infrastructure. However, one significant difference was their motivations for expansion and conquest. And I'll pause to let you write that down. Okay, so remember that the ideas that we set out in our thesis are going to create our topic sentences. This is a pattern I always want to see in your writing. So if I mention religious practices as a first similarity, that's going to be my first body paragraph. If I mention impressive infrastructure as my second similarity, that's going to be my second body paragraph. And if I talk about the motivations for expansion and conquest as my third idea, that will become my third body paragraph. Okay, here is body paragraph 1. Our topic sentence says, a similarity between the Aztec and Inca cultures was their polytheistic religions. Both cultures had multiple gods, but the sun god held special significance. And my apologies, there's another typo, but we can fix that. Held special significance. So make sure you write down that topic sentence. Okay, and after we write down the topic sentence, we want to mention the evidence that we would include in this paragraph. Okay, I know that there is a very slight chance that you would remember how to spell the name of this Aztec god, much less know how to pronounce it. It's Huitzilopochtli. I know you're not going to remember how to spell it. In this case, if this was the AP exam, then you would just say the Aztec sun god. It would be good enough. But when we're practicing in class, because you can use your notes, you can find the spelling, okay? So that's one of the pieces of evidence you'd want to include. You'd also want to include Inti, which is the name of the Inca sun god. You might want to talk about the Temple of the Sun. And you want to make sure that you make the connection that because these two empires relied on agriculture, it makes sense that they worshipped the sun. So you're kind of explaining the reason for the similarity. Okay, body paragraph 2. Extensive infrastructure is another significant similarity between the two empires. Remember that your topic sentences don't have to be fancy. They just need to go in order with your thesis statement. Everything you write needs to be working towards supporting your thesis, answering the prompt. So the evidence that we would want to include, we definitely want to talk about both capital cities, so Tenochtitlan as well as Cusco. We would probably want to mention the causeways that had to be built in order for them to have Tenochtitlan, because it was literally built in the middle of a swamp. We could talk about Machu Picchu. We could talk about the Inca road system and their tambos. And again, you want to try to explain the reason for the similarity or difference. And so in this case, trade and just the day-to-day administration of an empire requires infrastructure. So it makes sense that if both of these empires were large, they had to have the infrastructure. If they didn't have the infrastructure, there's no way that the empires would have ever grown that large. Okay, body paragraph 3, the topic sentence says, a significant difference between the two empires was their separate motivations for expansion and conquest. And evidence that we would want to make sure to include, the main motivation for the Aztec was human sacrifice. They needed prisoners of war in order to keep their sun god happy. So that caused them to continue to conquer neighbors. But for the Inca, the concept of split inheritance is really what drove their need for expansion. And if you didn't do the textbook reading on 3.5, then you probably don't know what I'm talking about with split inheritance. Make sure you go back and read the textbook if you skipped that part. Essentially, in order to support the cult of ancestors, the Inca continually needed to conquer more land. In the video that we watched yesterday, you saw the mummy, and they talked in the video about how ancestors were worshipped. And when one ruler died, everything that he owned was split in two. Half of it went to the new ruler, the other half went to the remaining living family so that they could continue to support the mummy. So every time a new ruler took over the Inca Empire, they now had only half of what the previous ruler had, and therefore wanted to conquer more. Okay, make sure you get all of this down. This video is posted in Google Classroom, and our substitute teacher can go back and play more if she needs to. We have one more piece. We can't forget about our conclusion. On your conclusion, you want to make sure to rephrase or restate your thesis, and then add a little something extra. Is this maybe when you explain that you think they're more similar than they are different? Or do you think they're more different than similar? Or is there a particular similarity that is more important, or a particular difference that is most important? Those are the types of things you can include in a conclusion. And today, you guys get to write your own conclusion. So you're going to do that now, write your own conclusion, and this needs to go behind period 3 in your binder. We will be checking binders sometime next week.